Put that veggie burger down. There may not be a way to beat GMO foods. Check it out, ding the bell, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, and share with your friends and family.
Guest today, a science policy analyst at the Center for Food Safety, that's Center for FOR Food Safety.org, and the Twitter handle is CFS True Food, is Bill Freese, the science policy analyst. Excuse me. Bill, welcome back to the program. GMO products in fake meats. Pardon me, I need a sip of water here. Tell us about this.
This is Impossible Burgers, and they contain a color additive that's derived from soybean roots. And this is a substance, it's called soy leg hemoglobin, that's never been in food before. And what it does is it lends the, Impossible Burger the blood-like coloration that, is, all for the purposes of kind of eye appeal to make people think that, it looks more like meat.
Right. Yeah. Now, just to be clear, there's two major players in this field. Beyond Meat, which is who like Burger King uses, they color their soy protein meat with beets, and I think they use non-GMO beets, in fact, as I recall. But Impossible Burger is using this heme protein. Heme isn't that the part of that gives the name hemoglobin to hemoglobin? Isn't that part of, or is it related to that red stuff that makes our red corpuscles red?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a protein that's in the same family as hemoglobin, but it is considerably different. And I think the main thing is it's never been in food before. So it's like whenever you have that situation where a company wants to get approval for a new food additive, especially a color additive, right, which is only for eye appeal, then it has to be really strong evidence of safety. And, basically FDA just didn't demand that. They really fell down on the job here. And that's the basis of our lawsuit, that they didn't demand anywhere near the sort of testing that should have been required according to the agency's own Bible for food additive testing. It's called the Red Book.
Any idea why the FDA didn't follow their own rules?
On that, if you're interested, but you're right. Beet juice was used by Beyond Beef, and so it's not like there aren't alternatives for this.
Yeah. Any idea why the FDA ignored their own rules? I mean, was this an example of this precedes the Trump administration, doesn't it? Wasn't this?
Wow, that's a good question. Timing, I'm not sure that it did, actually. I'd have to go back and check. But, it really does follow a pattern that does predate the Trump administration of FDA giving food additives a pass. Basically, we have a system where, in most cases, since the 90s, companies have been able to say, hey, we've got something new we want to put into food, and we think it's generally recognized as safe. And they can just make that determination on their own. They don't even have to inform FDA. Sometimes they do, and they provide a summary of data, and even then FDA doesn't approve the stuff as safe. Now, this case is a little different because, again, it's a color additive, and so a color additive does not get that free pass. It's supposed to be put through a much more stringent testing system, and unfortunately they didn't do that in this case, and that's why we're challenging.
Is there any evidence that the soy root heme, which I believe is produced in large quantities in yeast, that they're putting in this fake meat, is there any evidence that it actually does cause harm?
That's a good question, and thanks for bringing up the yeast. I had forgotten to mention that, but yeah, it's basically, it's not like they extract this protein from soybean roots. They have genetically engineered yeast, right, in a fermentation facility to produce, right, this a synthetic analog of this protein. But yeah, so Impossible Foods did basically a 4-week rat test where they fed the stuff to rats for 4 weeks, and there was suggestive evidence that there could be harm. Some of the rats that were fed this stuff had reduced reticulocyte levels, that's immature red blood cells, and that can indicate anemia. Decreased blood clotting ability was observed in some of the rats, and a number of other, again, suggestive evidence. And the problem here is that such a short test, and they only use like 10 rats in each group, right? In each group. So that's very few animals. And, if you look at FDA's Red Book, and again, that's the Bible that the FDA is supposed to follow for additive testing, they demand like really lifetime rodent tests, even multi-generation for reproductive effects. And the reproductive testing is especially needed because, in the short-term tests, there were disruptions in the reproductive cycles of the female rats, at least in some of the groups that were fed this stuff. So it's very troubling. It's troubling that they didn't follow their own authoritative guidelines and, just get the evidence. And, I'm not saying this stuff is necessarily hazardous. The problem is we don't know. And obviously for stuff that's going to be consumed by millions of people, you really want to have convincing evidence is what the law requires, convincing evidence of safety, and we just don't have that.
Well, and it already has been fed to millions of people. I know some people who are trying to reduce their meat intake who are just huge fans of Impossible Burgers because it looks like meat, and it grills like meat, it cooks like meat, and apparently tastes really good. I've tried Beyond Meats. I haven't tried Impossible Burgers, but or maybe I haven't. I don't recall. But is there any evidence that any humans have been? I mean, it's been out for a couple of years, hasn't it?
Yeah, but the problem is, it's like when you think of like with drugs, there's a battery of tests that are done in animals, and then when it's released for, human beings, then they do what's called post-marketing surveillance, where you look at people who are taking the drug, and then, if there are adverse effects, you kind of figure that out in this initial phase after having released it. But, we don't have anything similar with food, so it'd be extremely difficult to, trace back any adverse effects. And I haven't, personally, I haven't heard of any. But, you raise a good point where, go ahead.
Well, no, you can finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to kind of go, I want everyone to realize we're strong supporters of a more plant-based, diet. I think that's obviously
me too.
What we need to do for so many reasons. But, that's no reason to, skirt our food safety laws. And, as you said, we've got, Beyond Beef, their colorant is beet juice, which, is going to be safe. Yeah. And of course, there are lots of other, like tempeh and tofu and other kind of traditional.
Sure, there are other alternatives.
Are
there other coloring products in the marketplace, in our food supply? We have about 45 seconds, by the way, Bill, that we should be concerned about similarly?
Yeah, I can't think of anyone's offhand. It's each, I wouldn't be surprised if there were. There's just so many additives that have been approved, and it takes a lot of work even to investigate one. So
does the FDA have a problem with regulatory capture?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We have a challenge to this. GRAS system that I mentioned, generally recognized as safe, where companies can just kind of self-certify that their new additives are safe. We're challenging that because we do want to get to the root of this and get the process fixed.